We have a labor shortage at a time when the demand for the products that we all take for granted every day is going up and up and up.
We hear so many stories about manufacturers that cannot maintain their labor force. With a robotic workforce company, we're able to develop robots that can do those simple manufacturing tasks, and they can be deployed in a matter of weeks. A robot arrives on your factory floor, pre-trained and ready to roll.
We are now working with some of the largest manufacturers in the world, helping them hit those targets of hundreds of robots needing to be deployed in 1 year.
We launched this business to be able to help manufacturers address the workforce shortage that is holding their business back.
We are driving what we think is the future of automation. We can quickly automate away low barrier of entry tasks that previously were too expensive or too risky. We've now made it possible. And as a result of this, we can deploy at scale.
Don't be afraid of automation. You can deploy robots quickly, and you can do it with almost instant ROI. We need to be able to bring in more automation so that we can start to win new business. We can retain the human workers that we have, making their jobs better and more rewarding. And we can start to help our communities thrive.
We have a labor shortage at a time when.
Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. I'm Melody Rose, Duro's Director of Customer Success, and I'm going to be your host for the next 30 minutes as we talk about accelerating product development. You just heard about Rapid Robotics and revolutionizing the manufacturing industry with automated robots. And I'm excited today to introduce our guest speaker from Rapid Robotics so you can hear more about how they move from design to manufacturing in weeks instead of months or even years. Before I do that, here are a few housekeeping items. First, the webinar will be recorded and you'll be able to get sent a copy of the recording and slides after the event to watch on demand. Secondly, the advantage of attending live is that you can have the opportunity to ask questions. All attendees are on mute until the presentation ends, but please ask your questions in the chat and we'll answer them at the end. And finally, we'll like your feedback to improve for next time. At the end of the event, a link will appear with a 3-question survey. Please take a second just to let us know how we did and how we can improve the next time. And with that, let's get started. So I'm excited to welcome our guest speaker, David Hallock. David is the Director of Hardware and Mechanical Systems at Rapid Robotics, where he's responsible for developing the company's hardware. David has an extensive background as a mechanical engineer across various industries, including medical devices, aerospace, and robotics. From designing spinal surgery equipment, SpaceX's Falcon Heavy, and reusable rocket cores to now 7 years in robotics, David's focus has been connecting the software to the physical world. Thanks for joining us, David.
Great to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. And we're also joined by Mike Prom, Duro's Director of Product Management. He's in charge of our product roadmap and improving Duro for your business. Mike also has a background in mechanical engineering. He worked for over a decade engineering a wide range of products from farm tractors to skid steers to medical devices. He's won awards for using CNC machines to produce high-end cabinetry. And prior to joining Duro, Mike was a product manager at Fusion 360 at Autodesk and principal product manager for customer experience at Siemens. Mike, glad to have you on the team.
Good morning, Melody. Happy to be here.
So let's get started with a quick look at what's happening in the manufacturing industry. So David, what are some of the issues that Rapid Robotics is trying to solve?
Yeah, as you heard from our CEO, Jordan, and CMO, Kim, the big problem is that demand is increasing and there's tons of work that needs to be done, but there's opportunities and just not enough people to fill those opportunities. The skilled workforce just has openings and they can't actually fill those jobs. The average age of the machine operators is increasing, where they're not being backfilled by younger folks. There's a projection that it's going to reach over 2.2 million in 2030, and that means lost revenue for a lot of those manufacturers, and everybody who's trying to make goods and has demand for those just can't actually keep up and produce them. There's a lot of repetitive and dangerous tasks that actually also end up getting done where robots actually are a better solution. No one really wants to do a really dangerous job. So automating a lot of tasks actually helps and increases viability of just the entire business for a lot of different industries.
The industries have been using robots for a while, and so can you go into a little more detail why some of these jobs haven't been automated previously?
Yeah, I think everybody automatically thinks, very expensive when they think robotics, and a lot of time. So that's been the biggest problem so far, is that automation is expensive and slow. Systems integrators is traditionally the way to get things into manufacturing facilities, robots, conveyors, et cetera, all the equipment that needs to move stuff around. They are practically the best way to do it today, in a general sense, where they'll come in and see exactly how the whole operation is laid out. But it's going to take a long time, a lot of capital expense, and a huge overhead and experience in knowing how the pieces all put together, how those puzzle pieces need to actually interact. That can take 6 months to years to actually deploy a full system.
Interesting. Yeah, one thing I really appreciate that you mentioned, David, was that throwing people at a problem isn't the solution, especially when the work can be dangerous. I like to double click into that about how Rapid Robotics is solving for the labor shortage problem. So as we saw in the video, Rapid Robotics automates repetitive tasks that are currently done by humans in manufacturing environments. How are you and the team doing that, David?
Yeah, it's a pretty we consider ourselves partners, so we want to come in and see what a manufacturing facility is currently operating and how it's running, so that we can actually be a partner to the companies that are manufacturing the goods. We walk the floor with the customer, trying to find out what is a good task that we can automate. Robots don't always make sense in every situation, and sometimes it's better to handle things with other automation. So a robot arm isn't necessarily always the best option. We'll find those best homes. We'll find a good way to take advantage of the folks that are doing tasks. They can maybe shift around or do better tasks, and the robots can take over certain tasks. We then take existing designs that we can just adapt designs for, that we've seen so many types of examples of. We can build those up in our lab, test them in our lab, and then get everything ready to go before we ship it to site. That way we have all of the kinks worked out, and then we deploy it directly to the customer site. That way we kind of save a lot of time throughout the whole process.
Well, can we touch a bit about how things were done before in the industry and maybe how you're doing things and the processes differently?
Yeah, robotics is a big differentiator, not just our process overall, is that we're offering the robots as a service model. So it's pay by year or by month. So instead of paying for all that capital expense, you're paying on a amortized schedule. So the overall strategy and the overall place that we fit in the market is that we're actually also supporting the robots. And so you don't have to be an automation expert or a robotics expert to have one of Rapid Robotics robots on your floor automating some of the tasks. We do all of that, that whole side of the operation. We also reuse core designs for our robots so that we can get it into the market much faster. Our core technology is more or less consistent between robots. We use a variety of different types of robots. And the scale or the gripping technique or the fixtures may be different from each deployment that we do, but that makes it much quicker for us to deploy because we can build one standardized core configuration and then adapt it right before it needs to go into the actual task that needs to go. We usually deploy them in a pretty quick time frame because of that. We have a pretty short lead time in getting a concept done and a prototype on our floor, tested with customer parts, with manufactured parts, and then we send it directly to the site and can do final touch-ups.
Really, really fascinating how you are taking this approach. And I want to go back to maybe something I heard a little bit earlier in the conversation about how you're able to get customers in the market in weeks. Remembering back, it would take sometimes months just to get a product line up and running. Many times customers would have to do slow and work up their production as they're working out all the bugs. Can you give some details about how you've done or what's your approach to solve this problem?
Yeah, I think the summary or the one-liner is that we've done it before. So a lot of the tasks that we come and try to automate, it's very similar, even though the exact parts that we work with at different customers that we have, different manufacturers make different components and they're all slightly different, but the tasks are more or less the same. So for instance, we have a pad printing facility that's stamping some gradations on a vial. That's very similar to another company that also prints some text on the outside of a plastic container. So doing that whole pad printing operation is actually very replicatable. We can find the commonalities, copy over code, copy over a lot of the expertise that we already learned, and that can very easily work again for another type of task, and we can deploy that really, really quickly. The other thing, like I mentioned, we do it all on site here at our lab first. The final acceptance testing actually happens where, inside of our facility, and then we ship it and do a site acceptance test at the customer site. So it's actually pretty efficient and fast in that way too.
Great. Well, let's get into why we're all here today, time to market. So how have you been able to speed up this process and get to market so quickly? David, how is Rapid Robotics breaking that mold? And what are some of the secrets of getting the concept to the factory so fast? Tell us everything.
Yeah, a lot of the technology that we use is we try to embrace a lot of new stuff that's coming out. We're really open to using a lot of that new modern technology. So obviously 3D printing is a huge one. We really quickly and rapidly iterate on parts. So fixtures and grippers, anything that's customized per task, we can really quickly 3D print. We use AI and machine learning for vision algorithms, and we can partner with third-party equipment to really quickly add that capability to our robots. We reuse configurations across the board, so off-the-shelf components can integrate really easily with our systems. We have a standard offering of a couple different robotic partners that we have. Those are big companies that make robotic arms, six degree of freedom arms. But then we can add on whatever's necessary for a particular task. If we need gantries, 7th axes, maybe conveyor belts and laser gates and safety equipment. The whole process is fairly streamlined so that we can get it from start to finish of a task review and a task where we walk through the floor with a customer to getting the robot actually shipped out to their facility. That whole process is very streamlined, and we have a very fluid way that we go through the whole process. We also find the right things to automate. So that's a huge part of being able to stay fast, is that if we can find and identify the tasks that are right for our type of automation, we fit into those molds pretty easily and can find existing core technology that we've already developed, or we branch out and do new things. So an example there is, if we are unloading a plastic part from an injection mold machine, it's a really dangerous task there. We were able to really quickly actually take that machine, develop a cell with a safety configuration and a bunch of laser gates around it to automate that entire task. And now no human needs to interact with that 150-ton press that's just pumping parts out all day. It's just a robot doing that and loading and unloading the parts really quickly. And the people in that same facility can move to other more high value add tasks.
That's a really good example. I like your customer experience there. Reminds me of when I was working with Oral-B, toothbrush manufacturer, and in time to market, they were talking about their competitive advantage and how when they would come up with an idea, they would have about 18 months to go from idea to market. And if it took them 6 months to do the prototyping, get the process going, manufacturing, they'd have 12 months with a competitive advantage. Versus if it took them 12 months to get everything up and running and going, they would only have about 6 months left for their competitive advantage. Could you go a little bit more into details about how your solution gives your customers a competitive advantage?
Yeah, once we're actually on the floor with a robot, we can really easily go on site and reconfigure it. If it needs a new gripper or a fixture for a new part, so maybe the manufacturer doesn't actually even know what's coming from a customer that they have. They're a subcontractor for another company, and they change the SKU year to year, as you mentioned. If there's a new toothbrush mold that comes out and they need to start producing it, we can go on site and actually adapt our program to work with the new parts. So we're a partner to the customer to help them succeed and make their parts, whenever they need it. So that part can come in. We just come in and touch up the waypoints, maybe make a new gripper. That's also fairly quick. And that keeps the customers that we have, the manufacturers, that keeps their market advantage.
That's great. I'd like to dig deeper into that. Let's first start talking about technology. I know that you're using Duro PLM to document your designs, but what other technology are you using to get to market faster?
Yeah, definitely. Duro is actually a really easy way to get that done. We have a base configuration, as I think I mentioned, that then gets copied over for task-specific designs. So there's a core configuration where all the revision control, all the documented history happens, and then a modification. So, for a particular task, for widget maker A, that gets copied over, and widget maker A is now different than widget maker B, and we have different copies that live on. So those are now new configurations that we can keep consistent and stable throughout the life cycle and history of the machine as it gets deployed, as it gets tested with. Maybe if the customer does need those quick changes, we can adapt and change that configuration specifically. The other thing we use, obviously, I mentioned, 3D printing is huge, so that helps us go quickly. We have a huge bank of printers actually that we can print out, whatever we need, and maybe sometimes it's a couple of different versions. One customer in particular had a really tight timeline, and we had a couple different competitive ideas between the mechanical engineering team of like what would solve the problem better. Whether or not it should be gripper oriented, like down or out. And then the spacing that we had for the fixture and what the taper looked like to be a self-centering feature. And we printed out a couple different copies all at the same time so that we could actually get that tested same day, or actually in this case, next day, because the prints take a little time to make. And then that way we know what to actually send out to the production floor.
I like that you brought up 3D printing. It's amazing how far 3D printers have come and what's enabled yourself and customers to do. When you make these designs and you need to create new models, is this something that you do yourself, or are you outsourcing your 3D printing?
Yeah. So some printers we have in-house, and some printers we have outside that we have partners that help us with. So whether or not it's PLA or SLS, there's always like little techniques that you want to use for different types of prints. So, infill percentages and shell thicknesses, roof thicknesses, how the supports look. We have a variety of different types in-house that we can really quickly iterate with. But if it is something specific or large or specific material that we don't have in-house, we will outsource that. But still, the lead times can be very quick. And it doesn't mean that we use 3D printing everywhere. Obviously, we're using sheet metal, bent or laser cut in certain instances where the fit is right for that type of manufacturing, but it still can be done fairly quickly because of the partners that we've set up. And those partners are also available to a lot of folks and across the industry. Actually, just right before the call, we were talking about how I'm working on a part today where needed to get some CNC part made because we didn't want any thermal expansion for the part, so you needed to get it CNC'd instead of one of the things that we can 3D print in-house. So, there's always an opportunity to use a variety of manufacturing techniques, and it's not always one or the other. But yeah, this way we don't have to wait for some of the equipment to come in, and we can do test fits with mocked up parts. We can even print customer parts off with the 3D printers, put them in fixtures before we actually have real parts. Or if the parts that manufacturers have are very expensive, we don't want to manipulate those too often, or maybe we don't want to drop them as we're testing. There's a lot of considerations where we can use 3D printing instead or in place of traditional manufacturing, and that saves a lot of time.
And I know you also reuse core configurations. So how does reusing those core configuration designs help you move faster?
Yeah, that core configuration is very similar across customers. So we use collaborative robots, we use industrial robots. All of the base starting points are fairly similar, so that we can save time. The spin-offs become the configurations that we actually deploy, and we can go back and reference those. If there's a component that worked on one task and we want to use it for another new task, we can just pull that up and say, well, this one actually looks exactly like we had at this widget A company that I mentioned. Okay, so widget C company actually is exactly the same. Let's just start with widget A's version of the robot and make a copy, make a duplication, and start configuring it as a new one, so that we can deploy that one very quickly as well too.
David, what it sounds like is you're doing a really good job of keeping a record of everything and collaborating with your different teams so that you guys can adapt. What do you guys do to document all of this?
Yeah, that is all in Duro. We have SolidWorks plugins for Duro, and all the drawings and all the files are kept in both in the PLM system and the PDM system. We have a thorough gate process for approvals and reviews so that everyone gets a good eye on it. We try to collaborate through multiple offices. So many engineers are working in different time zones and can still look at our review process and the design reviews so that we can keep things moving and don't have to be fully synchronous during these type of events. It's actually really easy to stay collaborative once everything's in the cloud and have everything be accessible by everyone else at the company. Someone needs to test something in another office, they can actually do that. They can print it on their own printers at their office.
I'd actually like to talk more about that. So you talked about core configurations and your tech stack and having a wide range of teams diversity. So how do you set up your teams up for success? And then how do you stay connected with those teams that are spread out, whether it's your electrical, your operation, those in the field? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's that same method of we document everything. There's a thorough vetting process for all of our designs so that we're on the same page. That's all through a series of either Confluence and Duro's check and review process, PDM and its own file structure and management. And then we have another like built on top of it, like a higher level logic of how we get through the whole process of task review and the sales side, all the way to engineering, design reviews, and then validation and the FATs and site acceptance tests.
We talked a lot today about time to market, and we know in all of our work lives here, things come up. When those new challenges come up, how do you approach solving it so it doesn't impact your customers' time to market?
Yeah, and the happy path is always the one that's everybody's hoping to go through the happy path, but then ultimately something comes up and it kind of ruins your whole strategy or your whole plan. Plans are best made, but instantly invalidated. We have decades of robotics experts on staff, so when those inevitable little roadblocks or changes come up, we know how to handle them. We've seen these problems before. We pull people into the room, or we have a system that we can adapt to those new developments really quickly. The customer, as we mentioned before, the customer's timelines is sometimes the most important because they need to be producing goods the whole time. But because we have our robot outside of their facility before we're actually doing a lot of the testing, we can get rid of and squash a lot of those bugs before it actually gets to their floor. We don't have to take their whole line down. We can do a really quick swap once we're actually ready to go. We've tested it, we've thoroughly vetted it. We can actually do that testing on site, or we can have the customer visit us and see it in operation before they're ready to say, okay, cool, put it on your floor. That kind of gets rid of a lot of the problems and roadblocks and hurdles along the way. Obviously, they still come up, and we're ready to handle them.
And it sounds like none of these roadblocks delay the time to market.
Yeah, and so we still use the same type of techniques. It doesn't mean that we get no impact to problems and new changes or problems that are unforeseeable, but we try to adapt and partner with our customers to make them happen.
Great.
It's really great to hear about how you guys are solving all these problems, so quickly. If you think about all the people that are attending today, and you have to summarize this, could you give us some tips about how others could solve these same problems so quickly?
Yeah, adopting a lot of modern technology is definitely key. So having cloud applications and a lot of the easily accessible information across teams, having a quick, easy install method, easy way to cross collaborate and be on the same page. That can all happen with a lot of the new modern technology, Duro, Google Docs, Confluence, et cetera. There's a lot of different tools out there. Using all of them is really helpful to be all on the same page. Obviously, I talked about 3D printing too, leveraging a lot of new manufacturing techniques that can be a lot faster, a lot easier. Automation traditionally hasn't necessarily leveraged a lot of the newer manufacturing techniques, so that's huge. Finding commonalities across existing robotics too. That's one way that Rapid Robotics is solving that, and a lot of larger systems integrators. But as a small team, sometimes it's hard to find where code is applicable across the other types of robots, but it still can be done. So, try to find where there's commonality and copy that over. You're saving yourself time by finding the similarities between different tasks. We have a cloud monitoring and performance solution as well too that helps. So that's Rapid Robotics, also iterative approach and analytic approach to trying to find and optimize deployments that have already gone out too. We have also that thorough process where we try to iterate, test, and go through the whole process very cleanly. That's setting that up in advance and having a really smooth operating workflow is helpful for your employees so that we know exactly how to run through the operations, what needs to happen next, what gates are in place, what you have to do to get through those gates. We also maintain a library of all the components that we use. So all that is documented. Duro is one of those ways that we do it. PDM in SolidWorks, all of the components that we can have at a customer site. If something breaks, we can pull it up and make it again or reproduce it. So that's all kind of the best way we can set ourselves up to get that catalog bigger, understand more of the market and do a better job of helping service our customers.
Really, really insightful, David. I know we covered a lot today, but if you could give everyone here who's listening in one priority for them to, what can they do to set themselves up for success?
Yeah, automation, I think in general, or at least in my experience, has a lot of changes. And so being flexible to those changes, our customers, manufacturers directly, are always going to be faced with new changes, and us as a partner to those manufacturers, we need to maintain flexibility and be ready for that automation kind of changing all the time.
Yeah, I know that's something that we're very passionate about at Duro as well. We want to help our customers stay agile and do things faster. And with that, I know we have a few minutes left to answer your questions. Please put your questions into the chat for David and Mike. And if we don't get to your question today, we'll definitely follow up via email after the presentation. I know one thing that I want to ask you, David, was what's next for Rapid Robotics?
Yeah, Rapid overall, we want to sell robots into tasks that it currently need doing. Our current list of tasks that we can currently do is always growing. So our plan is to expand that and keep on going. We want to take on more and more different new tasks that are slightly different. Maybe they have their own intricacies, and we want to always keep on going into new types of tasks. We can learn more through that, and then once we learn a task, we can copy it and kind of, anything that it does in one task very easily applies to other tasks. So an example for there is like if we're boxing parts into a cardboard box with dividers, how does the divider actually get into the box, and how do we integrate with other equipment? Casing and palletizing and end-of-line opportunities is a huge focus as well too. So we're trying to get into more and more different types of tasks that are all useful for our manufacturing partners.
Great. And how are you guys dealing with post-COVID world? You guys going back to the office every day, or maybe transverse to a remote or hybrid model?
Yeah, we've got a couple offices in the US, and so most folks are coming into the office when they need to deal with the real robots, but a lot of the design can happen offline or at home. So, if there's a day where you actually are just solidly in CAD land, then that can happen remotely. And then, okay, I actually need to test the robot. I'll come into the office. And so a lot of folks are in the office every day, but then not mandatory. So it's definitely still a hybrid situation.
Awesome.
I don't see any additional questions, but I had one too, which is around, do you actually have a robot at home?
I don't, but a couple folks on the team do. as we need to test things, it does make it easy. I live pretty close to the office, so I can just come in and actually test on the hardware that's in the office. But yeah, we have a couple folks that are, a little farther away, an hour's drive. So yeah, it makes super more efficient for them to just have one in their garage. And so, we want to do some quick algorithms on the vision side, or we want to try a new gripper. They just have that in their garage ready to go to test something out.
Well, I know we're at time. I didn't see any other chat questions come in the chat. If anyone has anything, you can also reach out to us. I think Aphrodite also dropped our information, how to reach us there. We definitely covered a lot of insightful topics today. David and Mike, I want to thank you both for being here today and taking the time to be on the webinar. And thank you to all who's joined us to hear more about accelerated product development. Please don't forget to answer the survey at the end. And if you'd like to speak with the team, that's how you reach us. We'll be sending a copy of the slides and recording in the next 24 hours. Until next time, thank you for joining us.